Gemini is a legendary place. There have been some of the greatest artists that have come through that workshop to create some of the most beautiful and complex and technologically advanced, just incredible works of art have come out of that workshop in the past almost 55, 60 years now. And it's kind of overwhelming to look at the catalog.
Chris, it's great to see you. Can you tell folks who you are, who you work for, and a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Chris Santamaria, and I'm the director of Gemini GEL at Joni Moisant here in New York. We are a gallery that exclusively represents the Gemini GEL workshop located in Los Angeles. And Baltimore has been a city that has some really wonderful collectors that have come our way, and we have tried to participate in the Baltimore Print Fair in any kind of iteration that it has taken place in since as long as I can remember. I've been with the gallery 15 years, and so obviously the pandemic has put a stop on a lot of things in the last 2 years, and so we're just extremely thrilled to be participating in it this year, and that Ann Shafer, former curator at the Baltimore Museum of Art, is in charge of it. And so I'm really looking forward to connecting with everybody, reconnecting with everybody from the Baltimore area. It's just a wonderful fair. It's usually a very intimate kind of fair where you can really have some wonderful conversations with collectors up close. But this year, it's like we have to get this huge wall that we're going to be filling. I've got a little foam core model that I've got set up, trying to think about all the new additions that we're going to bring, and some oldies but goodies as well.
That's always welcome, the oldies but goodies, especially from Gemini. So can you explain the connection between Gemini, the print workshop, and the gallery?
Yeah, we're technically two separate companies, but this gallery in New York, while we don't have a workshop here, we're not producing anything with any kind of presses or anything like that. We exclusively represent Gemini GEL. So anytime that there's a new project coming out of the workshop, we will frame it, put it up on the wall, and sell those works, and hopefully send that money back over to the workshop so we can keep the printers paid, we can keep inviting great artists to come out and to start new projects, to give them an unfettered access to our facilities and complete freedom in terms of their creativity and some of the materials that they might want to use. So in a way, it's kind of like a little model where all the production and all of the sort of romantic kind of qualities that you would find in a creative process are happening in Los Angeles, but the final product in which it's framed and shown in New York happens in this gallery.
But you wouldn't list the gallery as the publisher of the works, right?
The gallery is owned by Joni Weyl, and Joni is a co-owner of Gemini GEL as a workshop. And so it can get a little confusing, I think, to folks, but the fundamental thing I try to say is that we exclusively represent Gemini GEL. So in a sense where it's like our name in the fair won't be specifically Gemini GEL, because I'll be taking the train down and I'll be installing the booth and engaging with everybody that's going to be coming through. So it's technically, as my position as the director of Gemini GEL at Joni Weyl, that's what it is. But it's essentially Gemini GEL. Yeah.
It is confusing. Can you share with folks who may be unfamiliar with Gemini, which is hard to imagine, all of the capabilities of the shop out in LA?
Yeah, so Gemini GEL was started in 1966 by Stanley Grinstein, Sidney Felsen, and Ken Tyler. For anybody in the print world, Ken Tyler is a sort of legendary master printer. He went off and started his own graphics company in upstate New York about 5 or 6 years after Gemini started. Stanley Grinstein and Sidney Felsen continued to co-own and co-run the workshop. Stanley's unfortunately not with us anymore, but Sidney has been with Gemini. I just think about it sometimes. He started Gemini when he was in his early 40s, and it was almost like he just completely shifted gears. And I just turned 40 myself, and I've already been with the gallery almost 15 years, so it's hard for me to imagine just starting right now in my life in the printmaking and edition and publishing world. But he still works like 7 days a week, and basically the workshop is, if I take my Gemini hat off, and I'm just speaking to you personally as Chris Santamaria, Gemini is a legendary place. There have been some of the greatest artists that have come through that workshop to create some of the most beautiful and complex and technologically advanced, just incredible works of art have come out of that workshop in the past almost 55, 60 years now. And it's kind of overwhelming to look at the catalog. Ellsworth Kelly did over 250 editions at Gemini. Robert Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns did some of the most important bodies of work that they'd ever done at the Gemini workshop. And today we're working with Julie Moretu, who just had a fantastic retrospective that went from LACMA to the High Museum to the Whitney and then over to the Walker. Analia Saban is a young artist that shows at Tanya Van Nochtar Gallery. We're doing some really interesting, unique editions with her. Ann Hamilton. The works that are behind me right now are by Tacita Dean, a brand new series of lithographs that she's created by hand of these beautiful sunset imagery from Los Angeles. So there's an incredible amount of history that comes from the 60s and 70s, which is really this kind of like expansion of printmaking that happened in America. And now what we see today, which is there are so many more smaller publishers, there's so many smaller artist-run workshops, different kinds of printmaking facilities that are collaborating with all kinds of artists now. And so it's kind of amazing that Gemini is going to be at Baltimore exhibiting alongside some of these really renowned, wonderful publishers, but also some smaller ones. And so it's in terms of the printmaking world and the history of printmaking, which goes back to obviously hundreds and hundreds of years. For me to be the director of this space and to be going down to Baltimore, it's just it's a moment of pride, I guess.
Oh, that's sweet. So I know you will tell all sorts of people all kinds of things about those Tacita Deans behind you, but they look photographic, but she's drawing them.
Yeah, we had a hard time figuring out how to articulate the medium because we've settled on hand-drawn lithographs. And what we mean by that is that she's not using photography to transfer images to lithoplates and then to print them. She's using spray chalk onto mylars. And mylar is basically a translucent piece of plastic. And the spray chalk is a material that you can buy at any kind of craft store like Michael's. And a lot of folks use it in the wintertime to make their windows look frosty, kind of like a frosty wonderland. So naturally, it's a very crude, but also powdery and puffy material, which was perfect for articulating the kind of puffiness or the airiness that would be in a cloud in Los Angeles. So she's spraying that onto the mylars and making that as a kind of hand-drawn element. And then that's transferred to a lithoplate, an aluminum lithoplate. And then once that image is sealed, then you can ink those clouds any color you wish. But so what that's at that point, she does reference photography to match colors. So there's all these really wonderful sorbet oranges and rosy pinks, some really subtle blues that kind of transfer over to greens. A lot of that is matched from photography, but really what is really magical about the printmaking process for Gemini is that we use a 45-pound blend roller. And that takes two printmakers on each side to carefully blend one color into another. So you get this really wonderful smooth gradient that's then inked on the plate and then run through the press, and then you lift off that impression. And we do all of that over again for each impression. So there's 42 of each of them. It would take us normally a very long time to print this project, but especially in the pandemic, it took us almost 3 years to finish everything. So we finally have them. They're up in the gallery, and I'm going to bring all of them down to Baltimore so everyone can see them in person.
That's amazing. And so each of them is one plate, or are they multi-plate?
I think there's multiple. I think there's multiple plates. Yeah, because some of them have different clouds that kind of they feel there's an element of space, of distance. Sometimes the clouds are dark and they feel like they're up close, where the sky and the gradient is far behind, and vice versa. Sometimes the clouds almost feel like they're behind the sky, like the sky is the element that's illuminated and the clouds are behind. So they're really just beautiful. They're amazing.
I mean, they, as we like to say in the print world, reward scrutiny. Like the more time you spend with them, the better they get.
Yeah, I like that. I like spending a lot of time with art and getting more out of it the more time you spend with it. So yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Oh, excellent. Putting on my curatorial hat for 2
seconds. There you go. Yeah.
Can you explain for folks who are listening how one might get the opportunity to make work with Gemini? Is there a process? Are you open to new collaborations?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And even though I'm not the one that makes those decisions, that's happening in Los Angeles with Sydney, the co-owners, Stanley Grinstein's daughters, Ellen and Ann, Joni. They're more involved with the decisions that bring new artists to come in. But a lot of the process, I give a kind of anecdote that Sydney once told me, is that when Julie Moretu had this big show at the Red Cat Gallery in Los Angeles. It was during a time when Elizabeth Murray had flown out to do one of the last projects that she had done at Gemini. And Sydney always likes to ask the artists that we're currently working with what kind of artists they're interested in, or what kind of artists they see as being particularly sophisticated or successful, or somebody that we should keep our eye on. So Elizabeth Murray's like, you've got to look at Julie Moretu. She's this young artist. She's making these really large scale abstract paintings. She's fantastic. So they went to this opening at the Red Cat Gallery and they met Julie. And I always tell people this, it took 7 years after that moment when they met Julie for her to do her first project at Gemini in 2010. So a lot of artists come in, they're like, oh, can I submit a portfolio? Is it a residency? Can I apply for something? And it's not any of those things. It's really an organic process where Gemini watches a lot of artists for a significant period of time. And it's not just about that. It's also about the kind of logistics, the boring inside baseball stuff of just planning to get an artist to come in to do a particular project. Richard Serra, we've been doing all of his editions since 1972. He's locked in. We almost have a wing of Gemini that's devoted solely to doing a lot of Richard Serra's projects. And we can schedule those things consistently, but for a new artist to come in, it takes a particular amount of planning and it takes a particular amount of finesse to kind of figure out when they would be able to come in. But there's no application. It's an invitation only basis. But a lot of it comes from talking to the artists or even some of the artist dealers. When we started working with Julie Moretu, she was showing with Tacita Dean at Marion Goodman, who also John Baldessari was showing. And so it's like an organic process, but it's definitely also kind of socially connected to some of those artists and some of the dealers that represent those artists.
But you have to be in the web sort of somehow.
Yeah, a little bit. Annalise Saban is one of the youngest artists I think she is the youngest artist we're working with. She's only, I think she's 42 or 43 years old. But she was a pupil of John Baldessari at CalArts. Like, he was like, you've got to look at this artist. She's fascinated with taking apart objects and mixing the materials around and doing unique things with the editions. And even though her work had nothing to do with John Baldessari's work, but because he had watched her come up through school and watched her take off, he was like, you've got to start working with her. So a lot of it's about an artist pushing us to look at a particular artist. But there's a ton of artists out there that I wish that we were working with right now, but and that it maybe in another world where we didn't have one particular artist scheduled for 2 or 3 years from now, that things could line up and magically happen. But it's tough. It's like we can only do so much. Even though we're pretty big, we can only do so much.
How many printers are on staff?
Depending on the time of the year and the projects that are going on, it can be anywhere from 20 to 25 printers. On Julie Moretu's last project, the Six Bardos project, I believe that there were 6 or 7 printers working on that simultaneously for about 2 to 3 years straight to create 6 different aquatint etchings that were extremely complex in terms of how they were inked a la poupée. In the etching studio for Richard Serra, you've got Javier Fumat, who is like a legendary master and has worked with Richard for decades now. He can have anywhere from 2 to 3 different assistants working with him to pull some of those large copper plates, or even mixing some of the paint stick with the silica that's used on the handmade paint stick edition. I would say 20 to 25 at a time.
That's amazing, because we have some exhibitors coming who are one-man bands, as it were.
Yeah, I'm so impressed by them. When you get into the nitty-gritty of the process of printmaking and you start to see the work, and then the thing that's great about Baltimore is that because you're almost like you're interfacing with the people that actually made the prints. Like for me, you're not talking with the person that made the print. The printers in Los Angeles, they're the heroes of that outfit. But for me, I'm just there to represent Gemini as best I can and try to talk about the work. But the thing that's great about the Baltimore Print Fair is that you really can talk to some of the printmakers that actually inked the plates or then engaged with the artists and wrestled with some of the technical aspects of it and even some of the creative things that happened. And you can get some really, really wonderful stories about how the work is made.
It's going to be great. Yeah, I'm so looking forward to it.
Yeah.